Well, hello friends. Welcome back to the program. Today we are going to work on Ladybird and we're going to take on this little framework thing called chessboard.js, which is kind of an embeddable chessboard for your web page. And it's just a JavaScript thing that lets you easily embed a chessboard with a predefined position, which seems pretty neat. And I saw it used on a web page, and we were not rendering it quite correctly. As you can see, it renders pretty well in Ladybird, although the letters here at the bottom are outside of the squares. If we open this in Firefox, you'll see what I mean, how it's supposed to look like. Let's see. Okay, that was a bit of a mishap there. Okay, so yeah, so here in Firefox, you can see them. The letters are actually inside of the squares. And we are putting them outside of the squares. So that's no good. Yeah, like this. So today we are going to figure out why that is happening and then fix it. And hopefully learn something along the way. So let me show you my process for attacking a layout problem like this, because I know a lot of people have been asking me to make more videos about CSS layout problems, and let's do that. So we'll start with my typical process for attacking something like this, which is to first make a reduction. So we'll start with this sample page here. And make a local copy of it. I'm using the save page WE extension in Firefox. There are a bunch of different extensions for this, but you need something that can download a full page and turn it into one local file, ideally. So now we have that as downloads chessboard.js. Yeah, so we'll just save that as cjs.html. And then confirm that we can open that. Good. And that it looks proper in Ladybird, which it does. And it still has the bug. So that's step one. Make a local copy of the problematic page. Step two is get rid of everything on this page that is not required to demonstrate the bug. So basically, the bug is on the chessboard, so let's get rid of everything but the chessboard. And hopefully the bug is still there after we do that. Sometimes deleting something seemingly unrelated can actually go ahead and neutralize the bug as well, which is irritating. So let's see. So I got rid of almost all the style sheets. We still have the chessboard, and let's see. These are the rows. Okay, so here we have some gunk. Oops, that's too much. Okay, and then we have some script elements at the bottom here. I'm just using the Firefox developer tools to clean up the thing quickly. You can do this by editing the markup, but the developer tools are pretty good at this. So now I actually saved it downloads CJS. So, I thought I did. Web page complete. Firefox, are you messing this up for me? Okay, here we go. So yeah, so we can still see the bug. That's great. So maybe we can be a little bit daring and try to reduce it further by getting rid of all of these squares except one. That would be ideal. So we'll just save that, load, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually an A down here still outside. So that is really, really good. There's a clear fix div here. We can probably nuke that. Yeah. Okay. So yes, the A is still outside, just not super visible, but we'll fix that in a second. Okay, so now let's see about first, we run prettier on the thing just to format the HTML a bit. And it's already down to 83 lines of code, which is extremely nice compared to what you might get if you're working on a bigger site like Facebook or Twitter or something like that, where you might have 20, 30,000 lines that you have to then go through. But this looks very lovingly crafted by somebody who was generating markup and trying to do a good job of it. So shout outs to chessboard.js for making something that will hopefully be pretty easy to debug here. So yeah, this is what it should look like. Oops. After a reload, that was not right. Download is, okay. So, so the next thing I like to usually do is to just get rid of all the closing tags here, because they're kind of meaningless. You don't need to close tags in HTML. You can, but you don't have to. So removing them makes it a bit easier to work with the remaining stuff. And then try to delete containers starting from the top. So like get rid of main and then reload and see that the A is still not within the thing. Also, let's see if we can fix up the colors. If we just get rid of some gunk here at the top. So one thing I like to do when debugging stuff is I make a universal rule like this, and then I just say color is black, important. And then all stuff hopefully will become black, all text. Unless there's a subsequent important rule that overrides mine. And then of course you can put your universal rule at the very end of the style sheet. But this seems to have worked, so that's very good. And then you can try to delete more containers, which seems to be still fine without those. So I'm just gonna keep deleting containers as long as the bug is still there. Yeah, that's really good. Okay, so now we are down to, okay, at that point the bug disappears, so we can't get rid of that container. It has some data attribute we probably don't care about, so let's just get rid of that. Okay. Now, next step is to just get rid of irrelevant things and reduce the CSS to the minimum required here. So we still have a couple of lines of CSS, and we can just try to sort of get rid of rules. So just try to get rid of some rules one by one here. Bug still reproduces. That cannot remove yet. We can remove all these properties because we don't support prefixed properties from other browsers. Bug still here. And actually another thing I like to add here is adding a border to everything. So having a border around your stuff often makes it, often makes things just appear that you might not even expect. So in this case, for example, putting a border on everything shows an interesting difference between Firefox and our version, which is that in Firefox, the A is wrapped in this rectangle, whereas in our version, it is not. So that is probably a clue to what might be going wrong, because it looks like our A here has 0 height. But let's see if we can get rid of some more stuff. So white and black seems irrelevant for our purposes. Yeah, we don't need the color of the square to be right. Box shadow seems irrelevant. This, do we need that? Yes, we do. Okay, so notation, but we don't care about the cursor or the font size, but position absolute probably relevant to the problem. Okay. And then we have alpha and numeric. So I'm guessing that numeric is the one for the digit, the numeric digit. So maybe we can even get rid of that. Yes. So now we have only the alpha left. And we can clean up the remaining stuff here. So let's see, do we need that? Yes, we do. The ID we can get rid of. And I think maybe we'll just call this thing alpha, just to simplify here a little bit. So we'll merge these two. Okay, a little bit of tidying, and then this one can just be called square. And we will hoist the stuff from the inline style attribute and just make it part of the CSS rule instead. So something like this. Okay, looking good. Now we are down to a very simplified page. And I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of all the white space as well, which is something I typically do. Let me show you why, by the way. So if we get a layout tree dump of what we have right now, this is what it looks like. So let's see. So this is the layout tree for the whole page. And you can see the name of the layout node. And then here follows sort of the DOM node that it corresponds to. So we have an initial containing block for the document node, and then a block container for HTML, one for body, one for div square, and one for div alpha. And then we have some text within the alpha div there. But you'll notice that we also have some kind of irrelevant nonsense nodes here, like an anonymous block container directly under the HTML block container, which has some text inside of it. And we also have the square div has some text inside of it as well, even though if you look at the HTML, you can see that the square div doesn't really look like it has text inside of it. The reason that this happens is because of white space. So what you can do to get rid of these nodes is to just eliminate all the white space in your file. And I actually have to tell Vim to not save trailing new line at the end of the file either. And then I reload that, dump out the layout tree, and then now all of the white space text nodes are gone. We only have one remaining text node. And this is just a way to sort of clean up the layout tree and make it easier to understand when you're debugging. And we are forced to create text nodes for all this white space stuff because that's just how the how the HTML and CSS is specified. You have to honor white space in certain ways, and it has to be part of certain measurements. Otherwise, you'll get an incorrect layout. But when you're making a test case, absolutely try to get rid of it if you can, because it just simplifies the test case. So what we have achieved now is we have a very reduced thing here, which illustrates our problem. The A is outside of the expected area. So if we look at the square, which is the outer one, also, by the way, I often like to rename these, so like outer and inner or something like that, to make it very obvious what's what. Inner, and maybe we can actually simplify further because we have a float going on here, and maybe we don't need that to float. Yeah, the bug is still there even if we get rid of float, so that simplifies things that we have to worry about. Also, let's just make this an even 100 because I like to use even numbers, makes any math that we might have to do a bit easier to spot visually, instead of thinking like, oh, that number is the width minus 3, which can be harder if the original width is 49 versus 100, if that makes sense. Also, The fact that it's relative position, I think that is relevant. Yes, it is relevant, relative, because the containing block of this inner absolute position thing here, if we don't make the outer have a relative position, then the containing block of the inner is no longer the outer. So the containing block of an absolute position element is going to be the nearest containing block, which itself has a non-static position. So if the position here is static, which is the default position, then this position here is relative to something else. Actually, yeah, we can see it down here in the bottom right, because the containing block of inner is now the HTML element, which is the nearest non-static position, I think. And we do need it to be either relative or absolute. We could also make it absolute. That's fine as well. Either one doesn't matter. Okay, so I guess we can keep it relative because that was what the original page had. Okay, so here's our problem. That, looking at the layout tree again now, we can see that the inner div with the A inside of it has a content size of 9 width by 0 height. And that's what we see here because we're drawing a border around it, and you can see that it's 9 pixels wide and 0 pixels tall. Now, why does that happen? We don't know yet. That's the next thing we have to figure out. But this was sort of the whole reduction process. This was really, really smooth because it was a very simple page. Sometimes it's a lot harder because the page is more complicated, and oftentimes when you're reducing a larger page, you also find unrelated bugs along the way that are not the ones you're looking for. And sometimes you find bugs in the reference browser you're using, like maybe Firefox and Chrome will render one of the intermediate test stages differently from each other. But today this was simple. So now we have to figure out why the height of this thing goes wrong. So we know that absolute position elements are laid out in a separate pass. That happens because the way layout functions is that we first do all of the regular block layout, and then at the end of processing a block formatting context, we will do a separate pass handling all of the absolute position elements. And we can find that in the block formatting context class, where we do layout absolutely positioned element. This happens in a function called parent context did dimension child root box. And this is essentially something that gets called at the very end. When we're finishing up with a context, this gets called because this means that the parent context that this context is a child of has now assigned dimensions, so has given size to the root box of this context, which means that now it has a width and a height, so it's free to lay out its absolutely positioned children. You cannot lay out your absolutely positioned children until you know your own size, because they might have a position that's relative to the right or bottom edge, and you don't know where those edges are before you know how large you are, basically. Anyway, so once we learn the size of our root box for the BFC, then we position all the left side floats, the right side floats, and then we also do the absolutely positioned boxes, absolutely positioned elements. So we call layout absolutely positioned element. Okay. And the way layout typically works is, at least in basic block context, is first you have to figure out the width, and then once you have the width, you can lay out what's inside of the thing. And then once you've laid out what's inside of the thing, you can figure out the height. That's extremely high level how CSS layout works. There are more details, of course, but here we can see pretty standard application of that pattern. So once we set up some variables here with the width and height of the containing block, then what we do is we compute the width for the absolutely positioned element, and then we lay out the inside of the absolutely positioned element, and then we compute the height for the absolutely positioned element. So the height is somehow going wrong here. And this takes us to this function, and we check if it's a replaced box or not. So a replaced box is a special type of layout box where it does not conform to standard CSS rules. So it's a special type of thing called a replaced element or replaced box. And it's a CSS concept from the spec. And it applies to stuff like images and form elements, canvases, stuff like that. Basically stuff that whose rendering is not just standard CSS rendering, but like there's something going on inside of the box. So it has a replaced content. In our case though, we're just using a standard div, nothing special, has a little bit of text inside of it. So this is not a replace box. And we can actually see that also in the layout tree dump. We see that the inner is a block container. And if we look at the block container class declaration, we see that it inherits from box, and box is a node essentially, and layout node is the root class of the layout hierarchy. But the important thing is to know that it's a box, and replaced box is also a box. So block container is not a replaced box. So we have to go to compute height for absolutely positioned non-replaced element. And then, okay, so this is already looking good, right? It says, fix me. This section below is partly on spec, partly ad hoc. That tells me that we're probably in the right place here for why this might not be working. At least we've been good boys and put a spec link here at some point. So let's go ahead and open that spec up. So this is the old CSS 2.2 description of heights for absolutely positioned elements. I happen to know that there is also a newer spec in the works. So I think we're going to reference the newer spec. It's called CSS Positioned Layout. I think, yes, CSS Positioned Layout Module Level 3. And let's get the, well, I was going to say, let's get the draft version. So we have the very latest, but the drafts server that they have at the CSS working group, it goes down, or the content just vanishes regularly, which is a little bit frustrating. So what I typically do is I go to archive.org and then I just put in the URL and get a recent snapshot of it. Like this happens, I don't know, almost not every day, but like a few days a week. It just goes down. So they're aware of it. It just never gets fixed. Anyway, so now we have it open in the archive. And this is a specification that describes how positioned absolute and position fixed, and I think also like position sticky, how all these different positioning models work. And where is it? Absolute positioning layout model. Okay, so I just want to know heights. The height of absolutely positioned non-replaced elements. Okay, so this is under the old absolute positioning layout model, but I'm still going to reference it. And because we have implemented, I think we have implemented the old model previously as well. So we're going to stick to this for now, at least, and we don't have to uproot all of the code and rewrite it in terms of the new model. But wait, what the heck did I just paste here? I just want to link. All right, there we go. So the height of absolutely positioned kluk. Okay, so yeah, this is probably where the issue is. So how does this code actually work? Well, what they tell us is that for absolutely positioned elements, the used values of the vertical dimensions must satisfy this constraint. So the top plus margin top, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so there's like a sum of things that should equal the height of the containing block. Basically, that means that we have to do a little bit of solving here, potentially. And we're not doing any of that here, I think, or maybe there's a little bit of that going on. Okay, but there's no like inline spec comments or anything, so it just kind of looks messy compared to what we typically have in the engine. So let's see if we can just do this nicely by bringing things over and writing this exactly according to spec. Okay, so we'll bring that comment over verbatim. Just that's something that we tend to do in whenever we're implementing specs anywhere in Serenity OS. We like to bring over spec text into the code so that you can cross-reference easily. And then if the spec ever changes in the future, it's also much easier to compare and contrast and see why something looks the way that it does. Because these specs, they sometimes just change. But we are tracking them. So let's see what it says here. If all three of top, height, and bottom are auto, then first set any auto values from margin top and margin bottom to 0. Then set top to the static position and finally apply rule number 3 below. Okay, so here is one condition that I guess we should care about. So if box computed values top, no, is it inset top? If it's auto and height is auto and computed values inset bottom is auto, then we're going to do this. So any auto values from margin top and margin bottom. Okay, so let's see here. Margin top is going to be computed values margin top so if margin top is auto, then they should become 0. Length make px 0. Okay, so we'll make a 0 value there. Same thing for if the bottom is auto, we will convert it to a 0. Okay, then set top to the static position. Okay, static position, calculate static position. Great, so we can just call that calculate static position for the box. Okay, So top should be the static position, I guess. Set top to the static position. So we need all these values to be malleable, it feels like. Top is static position. Something like that could work. And then apply rule number 3 below, which means that, okay, so there are a set of rules here, but now we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let's just, let's put that as a fix me here and we'll come back to that. Okay. And then if none of the 3 are auto, so if all of them are auto, then we did that. But then if none of them are auto, I guess else if, no, just if. If the inset top, you know what, I'm going to copy these out here to locals so that we can mutate them if needed, and it's also less verbose while we're working with them. It's top and bottom. Height, okay. Yeah, now this suddenly becomes a bit easier to read. Yeah, much nicer. Okay, and then if none of them are auto, so if top is not auto, and height is not auto, and bottom is not auto, then, if none of the 3 are auto. Okay, so if both margin top and margin bottom are auto, then we gotta do something. Solve the equation under the extra constraint, blah, 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 sure. That the 2 margins get equal values. If one of margin top, okay, so let's put a fix me here. If one of margin top or margin bottom is auto, solve the equation for that value. If the values are over constrained, ignore the value for bottom and solve for that value. Cool. So if margin top is auto or margin bottom is auto. So these are all, okay, these are like else if situations. I feel like in more modern updates of the spec, in situations like this, they would say something like otherwise if, just to make it clear that this is kind of an else if situation. Anyway. If the values are over constrained, I should remember what that means exactly. So I guess over constrained means that neither is auto. If the values are over constrained, so margin top is auto and margin bottom, so both are auto, or one is auto. Otherwise, that must mean that we are over constrained because neither is auto. So we ignore bottom and solve for bottom instead. Cool. Okay, and right, where were we? The heights. The heights of absolutely positioned non-replaced elements. So none of them are auto. Okay. What did we have in our case? Inner. So top, height, and bottom, right? So top, height, and bottom in the case of inner, bottom is 1px. So we have a 1 non-auto value, which means that none of these cases apply. So we're going to be here otherwise. Cool. So otherwise, set auto values for margin top and margin bottom to 0. Okay. Margin top if margin top is auto. Okay, so we turn that into 0. Same thing with margin bottom. And then we pick one of the following 6 rules that apply. Cool. So now we get to do all of these. So let's see. If top and height are auto and bottom is not auto. So if top is auto and height is auto and not bottom is auto, then the height is based on the auto heights for block formatting context roots and solve for top. So this is our case, isn't it? We have auto top, auto height, but non-auto bottom. Yeah, that's us, because only our bottom is not auto. The default values for the insets and the height are going to be auto. So we should be here, which means that the height is based on the auto heights for block formatting context roots. So height is going to be CSS make px, CSS length make px. Auto height for block formatting context root. So, this should be, I have to verify cast to a block container here. It should always be a block container in this context, but we have accepted a box. That's a little bit unfortunate. Okay. I'm just gonna verify cast to block container here. I think maybe the solution is that this thing doesn't need to take a block container eventually, but let's ignore that. That's a little bit of a engine artifact here. No viable overloaded. Oh, height is not a length. Height is a size. Make px. There we go. My bad. I forgot that height is a size, not a length. Okay, so, and then height is based on the auto heights for block formatting context roots and solve for top. Solve for top. So do the solving thing. We'll figure that out eventually. Figure out what to do with that. Okay. If top and bottom are auto and height is not auto, so if top is auto and bottom is auto and height is simply not auto, then set top to the static position. Calculate static position box y. And then solve for bottom. I'm just gonna interleave the comments here for maximum clarity. Okay. If the height and bottom are auto and top is not auto. Very exciting stuff. So height is auto and bottom is auto and top is not auto. Well, then what do we do? Pray tell. Then the height is based on the auto heights for block formatting context roots and solve for bottom. So same as up here, except we solve for bottom instead of top. So we'll just yank that down and solve there. Okay, so that's the case, by the way, that we should jump to, they said, somewhere up here. And finally apply rule number 3 below. So we'll come back to that. If top is auto, okay, so if top is auto and height and bottom are not auto, then solve for top. Okay, so I know we do this kind of resolution somewhere else. Maybe it's even for the absolute widths, absolute position widths. I recognize this, like, if so and so, then solve for this and that. This pattern is familiar, so I'm just gonna go take a peek at how we implemented that once we're done with setting all these cases up. So if height is auto, but top and bottom are not auto, then solve for height. Okay. Bottom is auto. Not top is auto. Not height is auto. Okay. Then solve for bottom. Then we're at the end. Okay. And then some stuff that we do down here is that let's see, what are we doing down here? Compute height. So the previous code, I think we can just yoink it out. I'm just thinking we do need to do some of this stuff still, actually, because it is resolving the sort of the final used margin, border, and padding values for the vertical axis are actually resolved here. So we do need to hang on to that. But I think everything else we can get rid of. I think. Set content height. That's a bit sketchy. All right, fine. So let's see. And oh, here's one of my favorite things that are slightly confusing about CSS, by the way. That vertical margins and vertical padding are actually resolved against the width of the containing block. You might think that they're resolved against the height of the containing block, but they are resolved against the width. So if you say that something has a margin top of 50%, then that is 50% of the width of the containing block, not the height. At least I know I tripped on that like 100 times. Okay. And actually this should be, we should be using our locals, I guess. So we should not use the original values that we got from CSS resolution, but rather the values that we have potentially massaged a little bit here end up becoming the used values. And then the height in the end is going to be the height size to, how do we resolve that? Resolved against the box to px, something like that, I think. Oh, percentage is here. Oh, shoot. Yeah, then we do need the height of the containing block, which I unceremoniously erased up here, so we do still need that. Height resolved. Wait, what does this thing want? It wants a length. What am I giving it? I'm giving it a length. Okay, this looks a little clunky, but let's see if we can move forward here. So note the following, or like next. This is not part of the spec, that's what I wanted to note. The following is not directly part of this, any spec, but this is where we resolve the final used values for vertical margin, border padding, and yeah. And here is where we assign the content height to the box. The box's content height. All right. So, solve for, I feel like, yes. So where are we here? This is width for absolutely positioned non-replaced element. So this is the way we did the solve for whatever here. Basically, we have these helpers that just take the equation and substitute like they take the equation and like give you the missing value by I don't have the math vocabulary, but basically by doing the equation at the top here and giving you the missing value. So we can do something very similar, I think, for our situation where we need to solve for bottom, top, and so on. So we can do, let's see, how would we solve for top, for example? Well, this is the equation. Oh, we have the equation right here. So to get the top, we need the height of the containing block, which is what the sum should be. And then we just take this and subtract everything except top, and that should give us top, right? So height of containing block, we don't have it here. We will have to yoink that up a little bit. We yoink that up here. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so the height minus, and then minus all of these things: margin top, border top width, padding top, and so on. Okay, it's going to be a little bit clunky, but let's write this out in a nice way. So margin top, border top width, border top width, and then the padding top. 2px for box. No, almost. There we go. And then the height, which is a size. All right. Padding bottom. Okay, so now these are becoming a bit easier because I can just copy paste and edit here. And the border bottom width. Finally, the margin bottom, and then the bottom inset. So the margin bottom. Bottom resolved box 2px box. Almost. Oh shoot, I have to look up if bottom, what is bottom percentages resolved against? Resolving here means that we resolve any percentages and any potential CSS calc function. So bottom percentages are a percentage of the containing block's height. So that's important. You have to make sure that you pass in the correct reference value for resolving any percentages. So height of containing block as a length. Okay, there is our solve for top. So now we get to make solve for bottom, which is the same concept, except we get to include top and we get to remove bottom. And then we also needed solve for height. So in that case, we need, we can remove height, but we need both top and bottom. Okay, maybe there's a nicer way to write this, by the way, because this ended up as a chunker. So let's see. Solve for top. Solve for top. Then okay, so they return top, right? So oops, top is solve for top. Bottom is solve for bottom. Bottom is solve for. Wait, I shouldn't be deleting those comments. Dang it. Here we go. You know what? I guess we could make those not return, but assign instead. So we could say top is, bottom is, and height is. It's slightly nicer. Okay, solve for bottom. Why is it not making the paren? That's kind of weird. Solve for top. Solve for bottom. Okay, I wonder if it would just work if we would if we would run it now. That would be kind of interesting. I'm feeling kind of hopeful, I guess. Hey, it did work. That's cool. Yeah, so this is a pretty typical situation. Like you have something in the engine that's implemented in kind of a hackish way that happened to cover whatever content we were trying to make work, but it wasn't like entirely written following the spec. And then what you can do is you can go and just read the spec and implement what the spec tells you. And then usually things just start working as they should. It's just sometimes the specs are less precise about what you should be doing, and sometimes they are very precise. We still have a bunch of fix me's. So let's go ahead and address some of those. So if margin top or margin bottom is auto, then solve the equation for that value. So I guess if margin top is auto, then we need to solve for margin top. So we get to do another one of these things. Yeah, I don't love the way that this looks. You could probably fashion something that does this in a much nicer way without all the repetition, but that's not where my head is right now. So I'm just gonna do it the disgusting way. Margin top goes out. Which one did I copy? Solve for height. So height needs to be in there. Margin top, and then we'll do the same thing for margin bottom. Solve for margin bottom. Okay. Solve for margin bottom. Okay. In the case of both values are over, if the values are over constrained, which means that margin top and margin bottom are both not auto, then we should ignore bottom and solve for it instead. Let's see. Okay, so that means that you have non-auto margin top, non-auto margin bottom, and non-auto bottom. So, okay, so there are too many constraints. Right, so we ignore the bottom value and solve for it. Solve for bottom. Straightforward. Up here they said, and finally apply rule number 3 below. So I think it's easier to do, just like copy this down, copy this up there instead of trying to do a go-to or something like that. Yeah, so we can just do that. Okay. And what did we have left? Oh, this one. Solve the equation under the extra constraint that the two margins get equal values. Okay. That's probably something I can do easily, but now my brain is fried and under the extra constraint that the two margins get equal values. So both are auto. So I take the remainder and divide it across both of them, I guess. Okay, so that becomes solve for margin top and margin bottom, which we will we'll figure this out. Margin top and margin bottom. Look at all these solve functions. That's gross. Somebody is going to write a comment on this video with like a really simple, nice way to do this. And I'm going to really appreciate that. And to the person doing that, if you would like to improve the code directly, I would be happy to receive a pull request. But for now, we're going to do this the dirty way. So we take out margin top and margin bottom. And then that is going to be our say like a remainder or whatever. So that's this value right here. The height of the containing block minus everything except those two values. And then margin top is CSS length make px remainder divided by 2. Okay. Nice. So I think solve for margin bottom. Almost. Yeah, missing some parens there. Okay, very, very cool. And let's see that we didn't break something like acid 1 or acid 2 or any of these things. Nope, just the same breakage we already had. And what about acid 3? This is not the right URL, but at least it looks okay. Yeah, I mean, this is clearly, other than the unnecessarily verbose solve helpers, this is definitely a step in the right direction. So I feel very good about the change in general. And I think we can take it as is. So it's definitely possible that I made some little mistake here, but I think that should be very easy to flush out and fix. So let's write a little commit here. So implement compute height or calculate height of absolute position elements according to spec. Absolute position elements according to spec. And then this patch implement the full height algorithm, the full old model height algorithm from the CSS positioned layout spec. I went with the old model since that matches, since we don't yet have the machinery required to implement the new model. Since width calculations, also the width calculations already follow the old model, so this is symmetric with that. Okay. Eventually, we should, of course, implement the new positioned layout model. But it's important to note that you still get the right results with the old model. It's just that the new model is, I guess, you'll get the right results in most cases with the old model. The new model is more, it's updated, and I think it has better support for orthogonal writing modes and things like that. And I don't know exactly what the benefits are because I didn't actually dig into it properly yet. But I know that the old model should get us a lot of mileage. And then once we have the machinery required to implement the new model, we can just switch to that. Anyway, so that's pretty cool though. So what happens if we open the site, then These things are now in the right place. If you look at these examples, look at that, looking good. Do they have something? Integration events. Play random computer. Random versus random. Wait, why don't these links work? I wish the links would work. Let's see, why don't the link work? Why doesn't the link work? Is this not a href thing? It's a list element. And it does not have an event handler? What? But then, wait. How does that work? Why not just use anchor elements? Come on. So what am I clicking on here? The event goes up to the nav here, I guess. Click example nav link. And then you're using the this of the event handling thing. Ugh. Okay, well, that's definitely fixable, but let's not get distracted by fixing stuff like that. Although, look at this. This is kind of cool. It's just making random valid moves, I think. Let's see if that works. It does. Kind of. Oh, all the pieces move from like 0, 0 every time. That's funny. But the important thing is that these letters here are inside the squares now. That's what we set out to achieve. So, great success. All right. I think this is going to be the end of today's video. So if you made it this far, thank you for watching, for hanging out. I hope that you saw something interesting here. I'm certainly happy that we got to update our implementation of heights for absolutely positioned non-replaced elements to follow the spec. If you spotted a problem with the implementation, or you can think of a way to improve it somehow, by all means, go right ahead. And I guess I will see you all next time. Bye.